In my role as a project manager for research and evaluation, I work with each and every one of you to develop and design your local program evaluations. And I do that through training, trainings like this one today, consultation calls, and also developing evaluation resources. A few of my other colleagues are here on the call, but I especially want to introduce you to Barbara Bedney, Director of Research and Evaluation.
And I am here mostly to say hi. I'm Barbara Bedney, the Director of Research and Evaluation here at the Center. As those of you who know me and those of you who will soon, I love program evaluation. I love everything about this. I love everything about working with all of you and learning with all of you about program evaluation, and just really looking forward to the call and going forward from here.
Awesome. Thank you, Barbara. So during our last orientation call, we introduced ourselves, we introduced our programs, and we introduced some of the administrative requirements of the grant you received. So in this call, we're going to spend a bit more time just diving into the grant funded work by going over program evaluations. And we hope that by the end of this call, we all have a better understanding of our evaluation roles and responsibilities, have an introduction and a foundational view for how to evaluate programs, and that you all know where you can find some evaluation resources. So to do that, we're going to spend the next 60 or so minutes starting off with reviewing our approach to program evaluation. We're going to let you know a little bit more about what we do here at the Center, how we do it, and how we approach our general research and evaluation work. We're also going to spend a bit of time going over the basics of program evaluation. We're going to go over the evaluation life cycle, the phases in that life cycle, and some tools and tricks for you as you're going through with your program. We're then going to spend some more time going over roles and responsibilities and giving you good resources that you'll be able to rely on throughout your 2-year grant. And at the very end, we are going to have a little Q&A session. So feel free at that point to unmute yourself and ask questions. But in the meantime, if you have questions as we go, you can type them into the chat, and either we'll get to them as we go through the presentation or get to them at the very end. I also wanted to let you know that this training is recorded, so you'll be able to reference it later, and we'll be sending out a copy of the slides at the end of this as well. So our approach here at the Center is really surrounding 2 main goals of our federal grant. And we went over these goals during our last call, but it bears repeating. So the first goal we have for the federal grant is to fund and support subgrantees to develop innovations in PCTI care. Here we really are focusing on increasing the number and type of PCTI care innovations. Our second goal is to increase the capacity of the aging service providers across the United States to provide that care to Holocaust survivors, older adults with a history of trauma, and their family caregivers. The second goal is really focused on skill building and increasing knowledge on PCTI care. Now, I bring up these 2 goals because these are the focus really of our research and evaluation activities at the Center. Our evaluation interests complement these 2 goals in terms of capacity building. We're constantly asking ourselves questions like, what is the PCTI care awareness and capacity among aging service providers? What do aging service providers see as the benefit of PCTI care when they're providing that to clients? And we want to understand how generally the aging services network across the United States understand how trauma affects the aging process. Now, we answer these questions through the Center's national survey. It's conducted every few years, and we conducted it last year. In the next few months, we'll have a report published on the topic, and we'll be excited to share it with all of you. Now, in terms of innovations in PCTI care, we're asking ourselves questions like, what improves client well-being? What reduces social isolation amongst clients? And how can we integrate a diverse community or diverse populations into our PCTI care programming? And for this focus of our evaluation activities, we really rely on you. We rely on you to develop and implement program evaluations of your grant-funded activities. And for the program evaluation, just a basic definition to get us all on the same page. An evaluation is a process by which a program or initiative is assessed to monitor progress and determine outcomes. And the reason we focus on program evaluation so much with your grant-funded activities is for 4 reasons. First, we are really seeking to determine the outcomes of your programs or initiatives. We want to understand what makes a difference in the life of clients. Second, we also want to, based on the outcomes, understand what successful programs look like, what successful models of PCTI care can look like. And not only do we want to understand the outcomes and what success looks like, but we also want to understand how we achieve that success, how we got to it, so we can replicate it or modify it in the future. And finally, the reason we focus so much on program evaluation here at the center is because we want to contribute to an emerging field of PCTI care. Of course, we have our reporting requirements to the federal government where we collect outcomes, successful models, and replicable practices and report that up. But we also want to contribute to really an emerging field. There's not much around person-centered trauma-informed care in terms of evidence of successful models and how it impacts clients. So we want to be thought leaders with all of you in terms of increasing the knowledge on this topic. And when we conduct program evaluations, we're really centering our research questions around 2 types of questions: process questions and outcome questions. And you're going to hear Barbara and I talk about these questions a lot as we move forward with evaluation consultations, because a process evaluation and outcome evaluation together provide a really holistic view of your program. So a process evaluation is one in which the methods of the program are assessed. This type of evaluation helps us understand what's working and what can use improvement. It really focuses on how the work is being technically done or logistically done. Complementing this, there's the outcome evaluation, and that's an evaluation that reviews the results of the program. This type of evaluation helps us understand how the program is actually affecting participants or clients. And I'll give you an example. If you take an art therapy program, a process-related question would be one that's like, does a virtual format work for art therapy? An outcome-related question would ask, as a result of the art therapy, do participants report improved mental health, for example? Another example of how process and outcome really are woven in together is if you take a family caregiver support group. A process question would be, does the meeting time of the support group work for all the family caregivers? Versus an outcome evaluation question would be, as a result of the support group, do family caregivers report reduced social isolation? So a process and outcome evaluation can be done in tandem or separately, but both types of evaluation and evaluation questions are necessary to have a holistic view of your program. Now, regardless of which type of question you're asking or which type of evaluation you're pursuing, we here at the center approach all of our evaluation activities through a PCTI lens. We prioritize having all of our evaluation activities become PCTI evaluations. And a PCTI evaluation is one in which the role of trauma is realized, recognized, and accommodated for by actively resisting the re-traumatization of participants, both as individual participants or as a community or group of participants. And we stress this so much because evaluations and research activities can be triggering for some. They can be re-traumatizing. Research and evaluation can be a reminder for some of how they or their community was mistreated in the past. Now, we don't have time to go into all the historical examples of this, but it is important to keep in mind that an individual or group may have a complicated relationship with evaluation. And that for many communities out there, there's an understandable hesitancy in participating in research activities. Many individuals and groups remain hesitant about what data is being collected, who is collecting that data, and how it is being used. While the trauma of the past may affect the practice of program evaluation, it's still very, very important for us to collect data and analyze program results. The data that we collect is critical to understand how we can improve services and make them available for all those in need. So to ensure that no one is harmed and that the evaluation becomes an empowering process, we integrate SAMHSA's trauma-informed care principles into the evaluation context. And this is because evaluation is really a powerful way to show participants that we respect their perspectives and choice, that we prioritize both their physical and psychological safety, and that we approach our work with trustworthiness and transparency as we become true partners in delivering services. Now, towards the end of this presentation, we're going to share with you a tool for designing and implementing your evaluations in a PCTI lens. It's a tool that provides you with a lot of different examples about how to integrate these different principles into your evaluation. In the meantime, as we go through the next section of the basics of program evaluation, I want you to keep these principles in the back of your mind, how you would approach your evaluation practice with a PCTI lens. So now that we've gone over the center's evaluation interest and approach, I want to spend a bit more time diving into program evaluation itself. In this section, we're going to go over the evaluation life cycle and some tools and approaches for each phase of that life cycle. Now, we won't have time to go into all of the details of program evaluation, so we hope that the next few slides give you just a primer, an overview of program evaluation. And to complement this overview, we have written all of this information down and included some examples in a workbook. We'll share this workbook towards the end of the presentation. Now, all evaluations, regardless of the type and style, are going to follow an evaluation life cycle. And this is a life cycle of activities that you're going to go through when you plan and implement a program evaluation. There are a lot of models out there for this life cycle, but we have narrowed it down and simplified it into 4 main phases. No matter how you and your team are conducting an evaluation, these phases are going to be very important to keep in mind. The first phase of the program evaluation life cycle is that of program design and goal identification. This is when your team is going to get together and review what it is that you want to accomplish and how you're going to accomplish it. You can think of this phase of the life cycle as your strategic planning phase or your strategic visioning phase, because this is where you're going to be defining all of your program goals, kind of laying out a map for how you want to accomplish them. There are a lot of tools to help with program design and goal identification. And here at the center, we rely on a logic model tool, which I'm going to go over in more detail in the next slide. Based on your program design, then the second phase of the evaluation life cycle is that of indicator selection. Based on the goals that you and your team have set out to accomplish, you'll pick key pieces of information to measure that success. There are many ways to come up with good indicators for your program, and here we rely on the SMART framework that we're going to get into in a moment. Based on the indicators you select, you'll then move on to the third phase of the program evaluation cycle, which is that of data collection. During this phase, you'll design and implement your data collection tools. Again, there are a variety of different data collection tools that you can choose for your program, but we're going to review a few options and considerations that you might find helpful. And finally, after collecting all of that great data, you're going to be analyzing it and reporting it out during the fourth phase of the program evaluation cycle. We have a few standard reporting mechanisms as part of your grant, but we're also in a few minutes going to cover a few ideas of how you can use the data you collect for your own purposes. Now, in the graphic that you can see that the fourth phase of reporting findings leads right back into program design and goal identification. We hope that you can use the data that you collect to modify and tweak your program over time. And we also hope that whenever you are designing your program, you can rely on data wherever it's available. Also, while the graphic shows that the program evaluation cycle repeats over and over again, very much in a cyclical nature, I also wanted to mention that it's an iterative process, meaning that you might have to go back and forth between these phases of program evaluation to get your program evaluation just right. For example, If you're reporting findings and you notice that you missed a key piece of information to make meaning out of your data, it's fine to go back and collect more data and then go ahead and report findings. Or when you're collecting data, you might find out that an indicator that you selected is actually really difficult to collect information on. So it's fine to go back, select a different indicator, and then go again and collect that data. While we're about to go through some tools and considerations to streamline this process, we want all of us to have an understanding that the evaluation process is one in which you learn as you go. And with that, I want you to keep two things in mind. And these are two common questions that I've received over my career in evaluation. First is that it's never too early to start your program evaluation. It's never too early to start designing and implementing your evaluation. And this is why we're having this evaluation orientation call 2 weeks into a 2-year grant. As you see in the graphic, program design and goal identification is the first step of program evaluation. In any strong program, it's helpful to dedicate a bit of time in the very beginning to really defining what it is that you hope to achieve. Another thing I want you to keep in mind is that it's best not to skip phases of the evaluation cycle. I think it's very tempting to start your grant, start activities, and go ahead right away and collect data from your participants. But the phases of the evaluation cycle really build on one another. To be able to report meaningful findings, you have to collect the right data. To collect the right data, you have to pick the right indicators that are a good reflection of your program goals. So now that we've gone over the evaluation life cycle, I want to go into each phase of that life cycle in a bit more detail, starting with the first phase of program design and goal identification. The first phase is really supported by a logic model. Now, this is a tool that helps you identify the activities you're going to pursue, the problem you're hoping to work against, and the goals of your project. And it's composed of 5 main steps, as you can see the 5 boxes on your screen. During the first step, where you're going to be working on your logic model, you're going to be identifying the problem that your organization is hoping to solve through the program, through the grant. Based on identifying a problem, you'll then select a long-term goal. And this is a very high-level overarching goal, the goal that you hope to achieve at the end of your 2-year grant. Based on the long-term goal, you'll then select a few activities. You'll select your intervention, and these are the project activities or interventions that are part of your program. You'll then identify some short-term goals, which are the immediate results of completing your program activities, and your intermediate goals, which are the result of accomplishing your short-term goals. And hopefully your intermediate goal should lead right back into that long-term goal. I think it's sometimes a bit confusing to look at this model just theoretically, so I want to give you 2 examples. One example I'm going to give you based on, it's a very simplified example, but based on today's webinar. So the center setting out with this webinar has decided not all staff have access to evaluation resources and information, and that's the problem that we're hoping to solve. Based off of this problem, we set our long-term goal, and our long-term goal, as I'm going to read in a second, you can see is a direct mirror of the problem. Our long-term goal would be that all staff have access to evaluation resources and information. Based on that long-term goal, we picked out a variety of different activities that the center wanted to host a webinar on program evaluation. We hope that by accomplishing this activity, our short-term goal would be that staff from all subgrantees will be in attendance for this webinar. As a result of attendance, we then set our intermediate goal of staff learning about the evaluation cycle and resources available to evaluate the programs. And hopefully, if staff learn about the evaluation cycle and the resources they have available, all staff will have access to the evaluation resources and information necessary for their grant. Now, this is one example, but I want to give you another example that's going to be a little closer to home. It's going to be an example relying more on a traditional PCTI care intervention or program. Let's say that our hypothetical organization here identifies that older adult clients are experiencing social isolation. Their long-term goal could be that clients would actually feel less socially isolated as a result of the program. Again, here you can see that the problem and long-term goal are mirrors of one another. Because they want to achieve that long-term goal of having clients feeling less socially isolated, out of a variety of different interventions, this organization has selected to provide free shuttle services to their older adult clients to community locations and events. They're hoping that as a result of providing this free shuttle service, 150 of their clients use the shuttle services and gain physical access. As a result of using the shuttle service, the organization is then hoping that clients feel more connected to one another, to their community members, and to community spaces, which will ultimately lead back to their long-term goal of having clients feel less socially isolated. Barbara, I'm wondering if you have anything to add here in terms of the logic model and how to work through it.
Just a couple of things real quick I can add just as you're going through and just taking some notes. Going back to the different phases of program evaluation, one of the things we talk about, as Carmel said, is just start at the beginning. Just start at the beginning as you're developing the program. As you think these are our goals, the second question to think about should be, how am I going to evaluate it? How do we know if I did it well? How do I know if I need to change it? So when you look at that life cycle model, just make it a habit and start thinking automatically through those different stages. The other thing I would say, just looking at the logic model here, is exactly what Carmel said. You go from the problem right to the long-term goal. It seems a little counterintuitive, but once you do it that way, you want to make sure that they match, that the long-term goal is the mirror opposite of what the problem is, because a lot of times you'll see in program evaluation, sometimes they don't always match. And so somebody's achieved the goal that didn't solve the problem that they set out to solve in the first place. So that's why we encourage you to do it this way. You go from the problem to the long-term goal, and then you work backwards. And that way you make sure everything lines up. So it's a very fluid and systematic way to set out the problem, the goals, and what you're going to do to achieve those goals. So that's why we do it this way. And looking forward to seeing what you all come up with in your own logic models.
Another thing, just listening to what Barbara is saying here, is that this is very much a living document. So you can go back to it also and modify it as your program develops. Maybe you tweak your short-term, intermediate, and long-term goals. Maybe you identify different interventions that you could pursue, but this is very much a living document, and we are also here to help with it. Towards the end of the presentation, I'm going to go over the evaluation consultation calls, and that's where we're going to be kind of workshopping through a logic model through your program design. So you're not on your own to develop and design this model. We're here to help. After designing your program through the logic model, you'll then move into phase 2 of the evaluation and life cycle, and that phase is that of indicator selection. Now, an indicator is a measurable piece of information that helps identify whether a program is achieving its intended results. And thus, the indicators you select are directly relevant to the goals you identified during the last phase. An example of an indicator could be the number of program participants served, the rate of participant satisfaction with services, or the degree of participant learning. Thinking back to the last example of the logic model, if the goal that we set out was to decrease social isolation, then an indicator could be the number of older adults that report feeling alone, and hopefully that would decrease over time. Now, a common question that we receive about indicator selection is that of, do we have some standard indicators that all of you can use throughout your programs? And unfortunately, the short answer is no. Indicators have to be selected specifically to your unique program. And since each one of your programs will have slightly different goals and activities, you'll have to select indicators that are unique to your program. While we don't have a standard set of indicators, we do have a framework that might be helpful when you're thinking about what indicators would fit your program. And that's a SMART framework. It's to create indicators that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Now I'm going to go over a few examples of this because I think selecting good indicators, smart indicators, is going to be really a good foundation for your data collection tools. We want to make sure that all of our indicators are specific by making sure that indicators accurately and concretely describe what needs to be measured. If your project goal is to improve the physical health of your clients, this is just a random example, and it could be a variety of different goals. But if your goal is to improve the physical health of your clients, an indicator that's not so specific would be that older adults feel better. Well, it's not specific because which older adults are we talking about? What do we mean by having them feel better? And what is it related to? Is it just generally, or would it be tied to the program activities themselves? The SMART indicator that's indicated in green in the middle of your screen would be the number of participants reporting improvements to their physical health as a result of program activities. Now, this indicator is specific because we know which older adults. It's the participants of our program. We know what we mean by feeling better. It's actually that we're trying to measure the physical health reflections of our clients. And we know what it's tied to. It's tied to program activities. In addition to having specific indicators, we also want to make sure that they're measurable. We want to make sure that an indicator reasonably lends itself to measurement because an indicator would be clear, easily understood, and measured consistently. If we look at the last example I just mentioned, the number of participants reporting improvements to physical health as a result of program activities, we know it's measurable because we know who we're surveying or who we're collecting data from. It's participants. We also know what information we're collecting. We're collecting the reflections on physical health of our participants. However, this indicator makes a big assumption. It makes an assumption about the cognitive health of our participants. If participants of your program have cognitive challenges, it might not be so easy to get the self-reporting of participants of their physical health. So whenever we pick a measurable indicator, we also want to make sure that it'll be measurable among our participant group. In addition to measurable, we want to make sure our indicators are achievable, making sure that we can measure the indicator through the resources we have available without overburdening staff or participants. Now, the same SMART indicator example I've been using would be achievable since collecting reflection of participants on their health would not be too costly, too burdensome. It wouldn't be too intrusive for our participants. However, a not so achievable indicator is listed on the bottom of the screen, participant blood pressure. Unless we regularly check the blood pressure of our participant group, it might actually require purchasing a blood pressure measurement device, and it might require additional time for our staff and our participants to do this measure. And ultimately, some participants might feel like it's too intrusive of an assessment, so it's not that achievable. We also want to make sure that our indicators are relevant, making sure that our indicators are directly relevant to the program goals we set out to achieve. Just because information or data is interesting doesn't mean that it shows directly your program's performance. So if the goal is to improve physical health, the number of participants reporting improvements to their physical health as a result of program activities is directly tied to that goal. An indicator that's not so relevant would be of participant frequency of doctor visits. Yes, that could be a very interesting stat. It could be a very interesting indicator to collect data on, but it's not directly tied to our main goal. So we want to make sure as much as possible that the indicators we choose are directly tied to the goals we set out to accomplish. And finally, we want to make sure that our indicators are time-bound, making sure our indicators can reasonably be collected within our 2-year grant period. If we look back at the same SMART indicator we've been using as an example, it would be time-bound. It's referencing a time-bound activity of program participation, and it can easily lend itself to being collected within the 2-year period. An indicator that's not so time-bound would be participant physical health over 10 years. Yes, of course, your activities will hopefully lead to improved health in the long term. But since we have a 2-year grant, we also have to make sure that our indicators are bound within that 2-year grant period. In order to collect data on all of the indicators that you selected in phase 3 of the program evaluation cycle, you'll then work on developing and implementing data collection tools. The data collection tools are the instruments or means through which you collect program data. And there might be a variety of different tools you already have in mind or that you already have set up through your organization. But we wanted to highlight for you 4 data collection tools that are commonly useful for PCTI care programming. And that's surveys, focus groups, observations, and existing organizational records. Surveys are by far the most common form of data collection for our PCTI care programming. Surveys enable you to collect information directly from individual participants, and you can collect survey information in a variety of different methods. You can do it via mail, online follow-up forms printed out for participants, or through conversations, both in person and over the phone. They can also be easily integrated into program activities and to client check-in calls. Another tool that's helpful for our PCTI care programming is that of focus groups. This is when we ask questions in a group setting of our participants and allow them to respond both individually and as a group. This format might be particularly helpful for activities where participants already meet as groups, and we want to understand their collective feedback. The last 2, observations and records, the last 2 data collection tools get overlooked a lot, but I wanted to spend particular focus and time talking about these because these might be things that already exist as part of your organization's activities that you can leverage to collect data through. So first we have observations. Staff and service facilitators can glean a lot from observing how clients interact with one another, how client behavior changes over time. And this is something that your staff are already doing. So it behooves us to leverage as much data as we can from those observations. Additionally, we have organizational records. Your organization might, for example, track how many falls a client has over the course of a few weeks, a few months, a few years. And if you're doing a falls prevention program, well, those client records can be a really great resource for you. So we want to make sure that wherever possible, you look at data collection tools that are already in place in your organization and leverage the data that you already collect. And that brings me to a few other considerations you might find important to keep in mind as you select a data collection tool and implement it. We want to make sure that all of our data collection tools are going to provide us with accurate, valid, and useful data. We don't want to collect data just for collecting it. We want to make sure there's really a purpose to it, and then we're collecting as accurate of data as we can. We also want to make sure that the data that we collect is reasonable in terms of cost, in terms of resources you allocate to data collection, in terms of staff time. We also want to make sure that our data collection tools have some flexibility to them. As we learned a lot through the experience of modifying data collection tools during COVID-19 pandemic, we want to make sure that our data collection tools easily lend themselves to being conducted in person or virtually. We also want to make sure that our data collection tools are flexible in terms of participant ability levels, that we can ask questions to all participants through them. And finally, we want to make sure that our data collection tools are done through a PCTI lens, really prioritizing and focusing research ethics. After you collect all of this amazing and rich data about your program and the program success you're having, we want to hear from you. And we have some reports, some standard ways of reporting back to us about your success. But these are not all of the reports, of course. I think during the last call, we went over all the different reports that are required through your grant. The 4 that we have on the screen are just the reports that relate to program evaluation. The first report listed is the program participant report. And through this report, we get a sense from you of how many people you're surveying. And we ask to get a copy of this on a quarterly basis. Now, you might not have too much to report for the first quarter or 2, and that's completely fine. We just anticipate that the number of participants you serve is going to grow over time. The second report that's listed on the screen is the evaluation update report. This is completed about 7 months into your program, and it's an opportunity for you to give us an update on your evaluation progress. It's also a great way if you need additional support for you to ask for additional feedback on specific areas of your program evaluation. The third report listed on your screen is the annual evaluation report. This is completed after the end of each grant year, so it's going to be completed twice during your grant. And this report enables you to really share the outcomes of your program, how your program is impacting participants, and share any details on the process, any insights you have about that. And finally, the last report on your screen is the end of program summary report. This is completed once at the end of your 2-year program, and it serves as the closing notes on your grant. This enables you to share with us lessons learned and provide us really with any other ideas about impact and process that could affect other organizations in the future as well. While we require these 4 reports as part of the grant, we really are encouraging you to use the data that you collect for your own purposes as well. You're going to be collecting a lot of rich data about the impact of your program on participants, and this might be of interest to your board or leadership, so feel free to share the insights with them. Also, this could be a really great way to demonstrate the impact of programming on participants and could be used for fundraising purposes. We also want to encourage you, wherever it's applicable or possible, that you use this data for cross-program learning and cross-departmental learning. There might be other staff at your organization implementing similar programs, or other departments that are interested in learning from your program as well. And last but absolutely not least, we want to encourage you to engage participants with the data. Share your insights of what you've learned, of what the participants have accomplished with the participants. That can really make the reporting phase of an evaluation an empowering one, where participants can really see how much they're growing, they're learning, they're doing, and it can really create a collaborative and partnering experience with evaluation. Speaking of collaborating and partnering, we're back to talking about PCTI evaluation planning. Towards the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned that we have a tool for PCTI evaluation, and this is it. We have brainstormed a variety of different ways you can implement the trauma-informed principles into your evaluation. And again, we have all of these examples and some templates and some room for you to take notes about how you're going to do this for your program in an evaluation workbook, which we're going to share after the presentation. But I will go through each one of these principles so you get a flavor of how you could do this for your program evaluation. First, we have the trauma-informed principle of safety. We want to be creating physically and psychologically safe spaces for all of our evaluation participants. And we can promote safety by selecting a good, safe location that's comfortable for all of our evaluation participants. We can also do this by assuring clients of their anonymity or confidentiality when participating in our surveys or focus groups. We can also promote safety by selecting a reasonable frequency and length of surveys and interviews. In addition to creating a safe space, we also want to make sure that our evaluations infuse the idea of trustworthiness and transparency by conducting all evaluations openly. We can promote trust in all of our evaluation activities by providing instructions on how to complete a survey or how to do an interview. We can also promote trust by sharing the evaluation purpose and how the results, how the data is going to be used. And then ultimately by then sharing back the evaluation results with participants. In addition, we want to make sure that we infuse our evaluations with the principle of peer support. We want to promote peer support by encouraging our clients to participate in the evaluations, but also encouraging clients to support one another in their participation in the evaluation. This can help clients feel more comfortable and forthcoming and honest in their responses, but also sometimes evaluations touch on some tough topics. An evaluation of mental health might be a little tricky for some participants to navigate, and it's great to create a community of evaluation participants that can help one another out. We also then want to infuse our evaluation with collaboration and mutuality. We want to do this by sharing evaluation decision-making in partnership with our evaluation participants. We promote collaboration by collaborating on the goals, objectives, timelines, and variables for the evaluation. We might even consider having an advisory council of our clients assist with the evaluation design, getting input from clients on evaluation strategy, methods, questions, and constantly being open to feedback and support for our evaluation participants. I think this brings up an important point that PCTI evaluation can easily lend itself for data collection. It's easy to see how you can infuse the PCTI principles into the data collection process. But we also want to make sure that we promote collaboration throughout the entire life cycle of an evaluation, from designing the program, selecting indicators, collecting data from participants, and reporting that information back out. Then we also want to focus on empowerment, voice, and choice by recognizing and building off the strengths of evaluation participants, really having an appreciative approach to evaluation. We promote empowerment by ensuring participation in the evaluation is optional, not linked to services received. We also want to promote empowerment by offering options for how and where clients can participate in the evaluation, and providing assistance to any client who requests it in order to participate. And finally, we want to focus on cultural competency of our evaluations. We want to account for historical and identity issues in all of our evaluation activities. And we account for identity issues by respecting the client's, acknowledging and respecting the client's history with evaluation, avoiding any language that could be a potential trigger, ensuring that the evaluation is in the client's preferred language, and using fonts, formatting, and language that's not stereotypical and is culturally, historically, and gender sensitive. Now, I'm going to stop here and ask Barbara, because you're focusing so much in your work on PCTI evaluations, if you have anything else to add.
The only thing I would add, I would love to add a whole lot of stuff here. First, I would just say, just as listening to Carmela go through this, what you're starting to hear, I think, is that program evaluation is an art as much as a science, that there's so much in here to think about as you go through your evaluation. What are our goals? What are good indicators? And a good indicator has to be based on, it's measurable and time bound, but it also has to be person-centered and trauma informed, right? So you have to take all those things into consideration. One of the things I like about this most is that we get to work with you all on these kind of things. So we'll have conversations with you and learn from each other. What is a good indicator of social isolation for the population that we're working with? What is the best way to get that data? Is it through a survey? Is it through an observation? How do we make sure it's done in a person-centered, trauma-informed way? So it's a very engaging sort of learning-based process that we're doing here, going through this tool and being able to have these conversations with you to develop evaluations that get us the data that we need, that get you the data that you need to show that you're being successful or that you might want to make a change. And at the same time, again, empowering the clients that you're working with. So it's a very engaging capacity building process and the capacity building strategy that we take through all of this. And I think it's coming through loud and clear in Carmel's presentation here.
I think that naturally leads us into some next steps of how we're going to collaborate together to do this. So I want to have you have a really good overview of the basics of program evaluation, and you have a sense of our approach to it. I want to go over roles and responsibilities and then some resources that we're making available. In terms of roles and responsibilities, we see them split between subgrantees and the center. For subgrantees, we hope that you take charge and really drive the process of planning and implementing your evaluation of your grant-funded projects. We'll be relying on you to really create some good logic models for it, to select good indicators and to collect data and report back out. You'll also be responsible for reporting all of your findings to the center through the 4 reports I previously mentioned. And also, the last bullet point here is you'll be responsible for reaching out when you need additional help. We are only an email or a phone call away, so we are available constantly to support you in this process. And in support of that, We're really looking to partner with each and every one of you to design your evaluations and collect all of the great insights that you have about your programs and report that up to our federal government funder. We have some resources for you that we've developed already, but as your grant goes along over the next few years, we're hoping to develop more evaluation resources for you as well. The resources we have available currently are four. First is the program evaluation workbook that I previously mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation. This workbook includes everything you've heard today in a written form with additional detail. It includes a lot of examples, some templates. There's a logic model template, there's a template for selecting indicators and so on. And you'll have also room to take notes about how to make your evaluation PCTI, how to make use of all of these resources and make them unique to your program. I want to make an important note here that this program evaluation workbook is not required as part of your grant, but we do encourage you to at least look through it and do your best to complete it. We don't want completion of the program evaluation workbook to stand in the way of direct services. And we know also that some of your organizations have robust evaluation systems in place, but I think this workbook will give you a really good overview of how we are approaching evaluation for this grant, and will set up your team for success. So I do encourage you to at least peruse it. If you do decide to use the program evaluation workbook, you can solicit feedback from us at any point. You can complete the workbook and send it to us. You can complete the logic model template, send it to us, and just let us know what kind of feedback or assistance you need with it. Also, feel free to send over any questions you have about the content that's in there. We are hoping that we can use the program evaluation workbook and at least the content that's covered in it to guide us with our evaluation consultations, which I believe all of you have received at least one, if not two, check-in calls set up for the next few months. The evaluation consultation calls are paired with your first two check-in calls. During these check-in calls, half of the time, the first half hour will be spent on program administration, and the second half hour will be spent either with Barbara or with myself going over program evaluation for your grant. During the first check-in call, we're hoping to spend some time just going through your program design, what goals you've identified, what activities you've identified. During the second evaluation consultation or evaluation check-in call, we're hoping to spend time based on your program design, looking at the indicators that you're selecting and reviewing or brainstorming any data collection tools you have for the program. During both calls, we'll be focusing on how to create a program evaluation that's person-centered and trauma-informed. So we hope that for these evaluation consultations, to really make the most of them, that you come with an understanding of the content that's in the program evaluation workbook, but also any questions you have. Take a thought, take a minute to really think through what your program goals could be and come with questions. And just come ready to brainstorm with us your program design. All the evaluation check-in calls and consultation schedule, all the forms that we reviewed earlier in the presentation, and a copy of the evaluation workbook is then found in your library of forms. This is where you can find templates, you can find online JotForm reports, you can find all of our evaluation resources. And then finally, during the first 6 months of your grant, we're going to be working on evaluation a little bit more, and you'll also have a copy of everything in the library of forms. But throughout the entire 2-year grant, we're here to provide ongoing support, whether it's in a phone call, in a Zoom meeting, over email. We're happy to help with anything that comes up related to evaluation. Maybe you're looking at, how do I modify a form? How do I change my goals? How do I analyze the data that's coming in? We're here to help with all of that. And I think at the 50-minute mark, I think we're ready to stop talking and start listening a little bit more. So I don't know, Barbara, if you've seen any questions come in.
I have not, but I just wanted to, before we open it up for Q&A, I just wanted to say one more thing really quick. Just in terms of the reporting, excuse me, forms that Carmel mentioned, We use those, and we use them a lot. And one of the best things that I get to do is go through the data that you all submit and look at the outcomes and look at what you've achieved. So we definitely look at those, and also some of the challenges, some of the lessons that you've learned, both about your programs and what they've accomplished, and any lessons and challenges you've learned about doing the evaluation. So if there are indicators that worked or didn't, or questions that didn't seem to work, or things you wanted to revise, we work with all of you because we want to learn those things as well. So one of the things you'll hear us ask a lot is, what did you learn? What challenges did you encounter? How did you go about fixing them? How did you solve them? How can we work together? So you will hear us ask those questions a lot, but we definitely use the data that you send us. So thank you in advance for sending all of that good stuff our way. I did not see too many. I didn't see a question just about making the PCTI evaluation chart bigger, I think, but I think we've sort of did that. But if anybody has any other questions, this is an open floor. I know we went through a lot.
You can feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question. If we don't know the answer, we'll definitely get back to you. And yes, the slides had things in a small font and a small print, and the workbook has it in a much bigger format, so it'll be easier to access and see.
Is the workbook going to be available on your website, or will you have a shared platform for us to collaborate or ask questions of others who are also doing the program?
Yeah, so the workbook, we're going to email it out to you, I think later today or tomorrow, so you get a copy of it through your email. We'll also link it to you in that email so that you see where it lives, and it's going to live for now in the library of forms for your program. In terms of how we can collaborate between the two of us, we can definitely take it in whatever platform is easier for you. It's an editable, interactive workbook, so you can go ahead and type in your ideas, your notes, your program design right into the workbook itself. So we're happy to receive a copy of it, or we can meet on Zoom and share screen. We can meet in whatever format works for you. In terms of, I think it was collaborating with others. Did you mean others in the cohort?
Yeah.
I wonder, Leah, if you're on the call. Do we have Leah on the call?
Yes, I am here. So I mean, Carmel and Barbara, I yield to your expertise because, of course, I'm not an evaluation expert. But in the past, we've done individualized coaching for the evaluations because we found that each program is unique and different, and that was the best way to ensure that each program and each program manager got the attention they needed to make the best evaluation tools they need. In terms of opportunities to discuss your programs together, there will be opportunities for that. It won't be really from an evaluation lens, although that could certainly be a topic that we could add to the discussion. But I yield to really Carmel and Barbara, since you all drive the evaluations coaching in this process. I lean on you to decide what's best. And we've just been hesitant to add more requirements to this grant to make it so that you'd have to participate in another call when we have so many calls with you already.
Yeah. The only other thing I could think of, and yes, you're absolutely right, Leah, that I think we prioritize working one-on-one on evaluation materials to make sure that everything that you come up with is really tailor-made for your program. But also, as Barbara and I are going to go through the next few months of evaluation consultations and check-in calls, we are going to learn about common challenges, common issues that people are experiencing with their evaluations, and we're happy to share those lessons out as well.
Talk about, I don't know if you can see it. We have a great question here.
I cannot see the chat, so just let me know.
So the question is, this is a great question. Do you recommend different types of evaluations for participants having varying cognitive abilities or who are receiving services in different settings? I can take a first stab at this, saying that is indeed a great question. We've gotten that before. Doing evaluations for, let's say, older adults with different cognitive issues is challenging. What we would do is work with you and have that conversation to see what's the best way to go about that, both in terms of thinking about what to ask, how to ask it in a calming, person-centered, trauma-informed way. So we would have that conversation with you, and we would have that conversation and look at your expertise in working with that population, if that's the population going to be working with, to figure out the best way to go about doing that. So it's a great question. In terms of looking at different types of evaluations in different types of settings, yeah, the reason we'd want to do that, and that goes back to what Carmel was talking about in terms of a process evaluation. So if you're doing a program and in one case it's happening in a large environment, and in one case it's happening one-on-one, even if the goals are the same, we potentially do a different type of question, just saying, you know, what did you think about this larger setting? What did you think about the one-on-one? To help us understand, are there different types of groups that may prefer the larger setting or the more intimate setting of one-on-one? Or, you know, what's the impact of having those different types of settings? So yes, we would ask a question in there that would include a question about setting. So that is just a great question in helping us start to think forward again, looking at outcomes and the process by which you all are getting to those outcomes. Thank you much. Great question.
Yeah.
Carmel, I don't know if you have, there might be stuff you want to add to that one.
Just a little bit in terms of the different data collection tools that we've done in the past for individuals' different cognitive abilities. I think it's really important to look, and this is why we're going to be doing this one-on-one, look at the abilities of your program participants and build off of that strength that they already have. There's a variety of different scales we can use for questions, a variety of different ways to word a question. And there's also, ultimately, we want to provide the best services that we can in a PCTI way. And so sometimes that becomes the primary focus. And it's fine if there are some limitations to the data that we collect, as long as we're collecting whatever we absolutely can.
Would you be supportive?
And just building off that, empowerment goes across the board. So we want to empower everybody based on the abilities that they have that they can take to this. So that's where it becomes that art form is taking into consideration somebody that might have a limitation or something, but still being able to get their feedback, because getting their feedback is really important. I'm sorry, you have to go ahead.
So Barbara, in the case of when we have a significant portion of our clients that have more severe cognitive impairment, like dementia, Alzheimer's, are you still going to be supportive of us having the caregiver be the one providing information on how what we're doing is impacting our clients, since we cannot obtain that information directly from the client?
So that is a great question. We have done that before, but again, that's a conversation we would have with you to make sure that the data that is coming, we understand, again, the source of that data. Is that the best way to get it? What potential biases that might include? What strengths might be to that approach? So we would look forward very much to having that conversation with you and understanding if that's the best way to collect that data, and how do we make sure it's as accurate as possible for that circumstance. Yeah. So it was a great question. Thank you.
And that's why I highlighted observations on one of the previous slides. If you get a lot of your data right now from caregivers, what they're seeing in their clients, client behaviors, client changes, we want to leverage those kind of relationships we already have in place and leverage the data that you already are getting from simple observations.
And that is also a really important point, because sometimes family caregivers can be the one to say, and you probably know it, right? I noticed a change in their mood. And so that's one thing, but we can even look at indicators. They're smiling more, they're less agitated, you know, and look at all those things that we can figure out how to work together through more of an observation format. It's a great point.
Hi guys, Carol messaged me a question and I wanted to read it. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, she said, with the first report due on March and at the end of April, are you comfortable with us using this first month to dive deeper into the workbook and complete the logic, model, indicators, and evaluation tools rather than moving forward with enrolling clients? We anticipate a pre-post survey model, which may be better to develop than rush into.
I think we want the evaluation workbook to be a really good resource, and it's fine if you're going to learn as you go and modify things in the future. We also don't want this program evaluation workbook to stand in the way of providing direct care to clients. So Barbara, you can chime in too, but my preference, I think, would be to continue with service delivery, and we can have more of a one-on-one offline conversation about this particular to the program, but use the evaluation workbook to support the direct service and not hold off on anything necessarily. I don't know if Barbara or Leah, you have any feedback on that.
I think that's exactly right. I think we don't want to, as you can see right through the cycle, we don't want to rush into an evaluation. We want to start that process as soon as we can, but we don't want to rush into a survey or into a pre and post, which is great, but we want to make sure everything is right there. So we want to, take a little time to make sure everything is going to get you the data that we need, that you need, again, in that person-centered, trauma-informed way.
Something else I'd add is the first two reports that you have due to us are the spending report, which is just how much you've spent to date, which would just be really the month of March. And the other one is the program participant report. And I'm anticipating seeing pretty low numbers for the very first month because it takes a while to hire the right staff and get everyone on board. So I don't expect that one to be as much of a heavy lift or laborious. So I'm hoping that you'll be able to put the efforts into this. But again, I completely support what Carmel said, and I'm really glad that she said it. Really serving clients is of utmost importance. And so we don't want to do anything to get in the way of that. So Carmel and I are moving in concert as usual. With that.
I wonder if there are any other questions. I know we have a few more minutes left in the dedicated time. If I don't see any more questions, we might be able to get some minutes back into our day. What do you think, Barbara?
I don't see any questions here. I think you gave them a lot of good material to think about and to ponder as folks start to think about their programs. And again, I can just say, obviously, we enjoy this very much, and we are very, very much looking forward to talking with you all and moving forward on some great evaluation work and learning from each other.
Absolutely. That was a great way to wrap it up. So we look forward to working with you during the next few months during our evaluation check-in calls and hearing from you if you have any questions. Of course, you can email us at aging@jewishfederations.org, or you can email Barbara or myself directly. So thanks for joining and dedicating the time to program evaluation, and take care.
Take care, everybody.